new kind of American politics when culture clash comes to the fore. Milo says, come on, this is bullying. This is PC bullying, but people are all over the map on this one. Let me get Remy on air, Syracuse, New York. Remy, you're on. Thanks for calling.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Sure. What do you see?
Well, I wanted to start, I'm going to work backwards.
Okay.
I wanted to start, first off, I wanted to actually ask Arthur a question.
Okay.
As a part of Not Your Shield, and for people who are listening that don't know what that is, Not Your Shield is a part of Gamergate. We are the women and the minorities and the voices that gaming journalism was trying to paint out of the conversation.
And your presence says, in part, it's not all white men complaining here. What you're not a man, and you're complaining too, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask Arthur, how do you feel? I mean, coming on and doing things and saying these things that I agree with. I mean, I agree things are tough for women. Things are tough for everybody. But you did things like tweet like Not Your Shield.
Yes, I did.
You tweeted things about me and about my friends and people I talk to every day that are just, they're dreadful things. And then you come on.
What dreadful things?
And you have
Remy, can you clarify? Are you saying that Arthur was intimidating or I don't know, unsatisfactorily insulting in a tweet or something?
I don't want to assume what his intention was. That's not the sort of person.
But what did he say that was so bad? Just to give us a sense of trying to understand what you're pointing to. I haven't read it.
In internet culture, we have this thing, tweet-like thing that you're mocking.
I see.
So tweet like
yes, and I intended to mock Not Your Shield.
Article.
Yes.
And
so
the way that I took Arthur's tweets I took them as hurtful. I mean, they were definitely hurtful to me. So I don't understand, as somebody who wants understanding for women and wants understanding for minorities, how do you start a hashtag like that?
Okay, I'm actually I'm gonna respond to this because I actually tweeted, I think Not Your Shield is like the worst thing that came out of this. It is worse than Gamergate itself because it's using identity. It's literally, ironically, using identity politics as a shield by saying Not Your Shield. It's saying that the reason people are criticizing racism or sexism in gaming is that they are saying that all people of a given race or all people of a given sex must be offended. And if one person comes out and says, I'm not offended, then we can shut down the conversation. In fact, it pretty much turns into this weird reversal where all of a sudden it's a lot like the Redskins name controversy. People are saying real Indians don't care. Look at this poll. Obviously, it's only the PC, white, upper class, latte liberal, whatever stereotype you want to use, left that cares about it. It's
but Remy's point is
it's the white agitators from the civil rights movement.
But she's saying she felt hurt by what you put there.
Well, others feel hurt about Not Your Shield.
Yeah.
It's stupid. Okay, I was that guy. Okay, in college I was the Asian guy saying, okay, I personally don't have a problem with this. I personally don't have a problem with these stereotypes. I enjoy this movie, and there's nothing wrong with me doing that. But there's something wrong with parading me around and saying, because of that, everyone who says there's a problem here, that there's a general overall problem in the culture, has to shut up. And that's what gets me. That's what gets Arthur, using it as a shield.
We've got it. And Remy, I appreciate your calling as well. Parker in Chicago. Parker, thank you for calling. You're on.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I just want to say thank you for having this discussion.
Sure.
My big question or big issue was this. I was very neutral coming in, but I tend to just do a lot of reading. I have a little bit of time.
Okay.
And I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was this Game Journos Pros listserv. And I think basically, if I understand it correctly, it was a group or a large group of journalists from across the gamut of game journalism, including mainstream media outlets, that would discuss behind-the-scenes ways in which to present stories. And I think a lot of gamers are upset about this, and I think it's reflective of kind of the mistrust of the gaming media.
Hey, Parker, explain something to me, because I'm not into the gaming world. Why would they even do that? I mean, what would they collude to? What would be the agenda of? I mean, they're reviewing video games. What's the big deal?
Well, there's a lot of financial incentives. The gaming industry is
what sells?
We're talking about multi-billion-dollar.
Okay, industry. I get that. Yeah.
and you basically reviews, especially Metacritic scores, really affect the game developer. I mean, financially, you get a bonus if you get a certain Metacritic score. And if, let's say, a game developer doesn't say something that really jives with the media, a lot of people will gang up and bully them.
Parker, let me take it right there. I know you've got more, but we have so much on our plate here. I want to get back to London, but let me pick that up. Kyle Wagner at Deadspin. Can we just for a second look at this? I mean, we've got people online. Christopher says, please focus on the specifics of the corruption in journalism. Within any movement, you're going to have, people who take it too far. Is it possible, Kyle, that there's a legitimate complaint at the heart of this? And yes, some people with Gamergate become violent, menacing. Some are misogynistic, you name it. But that there is a place here for kind of citizen action in this realm, and that's what some are doing.
So, as I mentioned before, gaming journalism is fraught with economic and other ethical gray areas. But to go back to what Milo was talking about earlier, what seems to be at issue is Milo says that there are a lot of outside feminists, very few, he says, I would disagree, that have friends in the media that are framing discussions in a certain way. They feel that is unethical. If that is accurately their argument here, I would ask, what do they think is going to be the substantive end to that? What's being...
I don't quite get that question. What do you mean, Kyle? I don't get it.
Basically, any feminist activist or black activist, whatever, like I have a friend, Evan Narcisse at Kotaku, who has argued over and over that we need more black characters, black main characters who are fleshed out fully in video games. And what they're asking for is representation, just better characters. At the end of the day, people are asking for better stories, better characters, better writing to elevate gaming up to a higher level of art. That's really what they're asking for. So I'm curious what the objection to that is.
Milo, what's the objection? If that's the request, what's the objection, Milo Yiannopoulos?
That isn't the request. Obviously, that's a mischaracterization. What's in fact happening, and I note with interest, Gawker, possibly one of the whitest media organizations on the planet, has taken up the cudgels for diversity. I know also that Gawker is taking up, the defense of people who have been doxxed. This is Gawker, an organization that routinely bullies public figures to come out as homosexual, outs some of them. Itself. It has no moral authority whatsoever to talk about any issues of online bullying. But I will answer the question. Okay. This is not an issue of making games a higher art form. What people are worried about, and I think with some justification, is that these wrong criticisms will influence game developers to introduce tokenism into games, which nobody is really asking for. Consumers aren't asking for this. And I just want to address one thing very, very briefly. I'm sorry that it's not quite the question that you asked me, but it's really super important. We're talking as if women tiptoe into this sphere and are suddenly assaulted by this wave of misogyny. Well, let's just be completely honest with ourselves here. Some of the feminist critics, and I will say, there is no justification whatsoever for the doxing. There is no justification whatsoever for abuse and threats, and the people who do it should be caught.
Doxing, that is exposing people's personal documents online as a kind of punishment.
No excuse for any of that. These people should be punished. These people should be incarcerated where necessary. However, this isn't happening out of the blue to women who innocently tiptoe into this subject and get barrages of abuse. These women are professional provocateurs.
Well, you call them an army of sociopathic feminist programmers abetted by really?
That is exactly what some of them are. I am a provocative columnist, but what I don't do when I receive criticism, and in some cases death threats, and as a result of Gamergate, I had a syringe through the mail, far more horrific than anything I've heard of on the other side.
Good.
I have to be honest with you.
Not good.
But what I don't do about it is play the victim, set up a Kickstarter page, which so many of these women do, asking for money and sympathy, and do a press tour. What I do is accept the consequences of being a provocative journalist and say, you know what, I'm going out there, I'm saying controversial things sometimes. You're irritating people sometimes.
But they shouldn't have to have death threats, right? They should. And what if they really feel that there's oppression going on? You say not. We got that. Hold the thought. Zoe in Block Island, Rhode Island, calling in. Zoe, thank you for calling. You're on with Milo and the rest.
Hi. I'm a female gamer myself. This is a pet issue of mine. Feminism in video games is pretty close to my heart since it's the community I'm most involved in.
Okay.
And regardless of whether or not this is about gamer journalism, one has to acknowledge the fact that it's still attacking. The community out there is terrifying. I've received threats. I've received, it's very scary out there to be a woman sometimes, even in very casual scenarios. You learn very early on never to mention that you're female. It's terrifying. And I'm not a columnist. I'm not anything. I'm just.
What do you mean? You're playing a game, right? So what's terrifying? And forgive me, Zoe. I don't doubt it, but I just don't quite get it.
So oftentimes in multiplayer games, there is a certain there's communication between players.
Okay.
And you learn never to say you're a girl.
Because
if you do, it immediately becomes threats, misogyny. The jokes that start are uncomfortable at first, and then they just get worse and worse. And oftentimes you have the ability to step away from that, but you know it's there. Every time you want to walk into something, you know it's there.
What kind of threats are you talking about?
There have been, I've had violent threats, I've had rape threats, just any kind of thing like that, that if you're a woman, especially if you're winning, they get mad.
Zoe, we've got it, and I appreciate your call. We're talking about Gamergate. Soraya, you've got Milo saying, come on, everybody faces rough stuff on the web. Women shouldn't feel singled out. You've got Zoe, a gamer, who says, let it be known that you're a woman. And you've got, rape threats in the middle of the game. And here we see it in Gamergate spilling out of Gameland into the real world. But Milo's saying, the world is not a perfect place. Come on.
So a couple of things. One is that the reference that Milo made earlier, excuse me, to the Pew research is research that was released yesterday, in which the study concluded that women in particular suffer from severe harms of online harassment. Men suffer overall, but this indicates the problem with the word harassment. Men are called offensive names. They are purposefully embarrassed. They experience physical threats, particularly if they're in the gaming community. Women, however, are stalked. They're sexually harassed. They're physically threatened. And the harassment that they experience is a sustained form of harassment. And those are qualitatively different things, right? It's very different to be called name from being stalked for months or years on end. And so what we're talking about when we say harassment masks the reality of the connection between online and offline violence against women. And it goes directly to this point of who establishes norms. Because when we say things like imminent threat or imminent harm as a baseline for how to determine danger, that in itself is androcentric, because men are hurt by strangers, right, in acts of punctuated violence. Women live with and adapt to pervasive and constant threats in their homes and in public space. It's why we hold keys in our hands. It's why we join gyms. It's why we have parking strategies, right? And you see that translated into interactions online. So what the caller just talked about is very prevalent in gaming. There's a study that shows that up to 70% of women playing multiplayer games change their online personas to male so that they are not harassed. Women are 90% of the victims of male-perpetrated revenge porn. They're 100 times more likely to experience harassment online if they have female names. And so this becomes not something that is solely focused on individuals who may or may not be having these experiences, but it's a class-based form of violence, right? And so when we talk about gaming within the larger context of atomized misogyny, we have to be able to appreciate the fact that there's no equivalence between being called an offensive name and sustained harassment. And the norm setting that we're talking about in the gaming industry, in journalism, is implicated in ignoring that fact because it doesn't actually recognize that those are legitimate concerns.
So I've got it. I'm sure Milo, he would have many disagreements there. Kyle, I want to bring it to you once more because many people outside gaming may still be listening to this and say, so what? You write, Kyle, that what we're seeing here is a rehearsal where the mechanisms you write of a toxic and inhumane politics are being tested and improved. Tomorrow's Lee Atwater will work through, internet sock puppets. Tomorrow's Sister Soldier will get shouted down with rape threats. what are you saying the implications are, Kyle, for the larger culture, the